Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you a question that may shake the roots of what you've been taught. What if the strongest person you'll ever meet doesn't walk beside a man, but walks alone with grace, purpose, and thunder? Inner silence in a world that's obsessed with labels, definitions, and expectations. There is a quiet revolution happening, and it's not loud, it doesn't beg for attention. It simply lives alone and unapologetically. Today we unravel the truth about women who live alone without a man, and I urge you to stay until then, because what you'll discover is not just about women, it's about what freedom truly means for all of us. There is a strange fear that grips society when they see a woman standing alone, no ring on her finger, no partner in her home, no man to complete the frame that the world insists is only half full. Without his presence, they look at her and assume absence. They whisper words like lonely, left behind, unwanted, but those words reveal far more about them than they do about her, because solitude is not loneliness, it never was. There is a woman right now waking up in a home where the only footsteps she hears are her own. She stretches in her bed, not reaching for someone who isn't there, but embracing the silence as a companion she has come to know intimately. That silence isn't cold or cruel, it's warm, familiar, alive, because it speaks to her in ways no human voice ever could. In that stillness she hears her own thoughts clearly, her dreams echo without interruption. Her fears no longer need to be buried or explained away. They are simply hers to face. People assume that to live alone is to live in emptiness. But what they fail to see is the fullness that comes when you are enough for yourself, when you can sit in your own presence without the urge to flee, when you can cook a meal and savor it slowly without needing a witness to validate the moment, when you can laugh out loud in a room with no one else in it and realize that joy does not require an audience, it simply requires truth. The woman who lives alone doesn't wake each morning with regret. She wakes with freedom. She doesn't wait for a message that never comes. She doesn't hold her breath for a love that may never arrive. Instead, she inhales deeply, knowing that her lungs expand not with hope for someone else, but with gratitude for herself. She has learned the art of companionship with her own soul. She has walked through the discomfort of evenings that felt too quiet, too hollow, too still, and emerged on the other side with a deeper understanding that discomfort was never the enemy. It was the invitation to meet herself fully and without distraction, and now she answers it every day. There are those who will never understand this. They will continue to believe that solitude is a problem to be solved. Thought a woman on her own must be searching, must be settling, must be in between where she was and where she's meant to, but some women aren't in between anything. Some women have arrived, and they're staying not because they gave up, but because they woke up. Walk up to the truth that self-worth doesn't wear a tuxedo, that love doesn't always come wrapped in romance, that a full life isn't measured by how many people occupy your space, but by how deeply you occupy your own. It's easy to romanticize impatience. Easy to say that two is always better than one, but that's not the truth. Two can be noise, two can be chaos. Two can be the slow erosion of a woman's identity beneath the weight of someone else's dreams. She knows this because she's seen it, perhaps she's lived it, perhaps once she gave her love to someone who mistook it for obligation, perhaps she bent herself into 1,000 versions just to make things work, and one day she stopped, not because she failed, but because she finally understood loving someone else should never require abandoning yourself. So she chose solitude not as an escape, but as a return to her own voice, her own rhythm, her own inner compass that had long been silenced beneath the noise of trying to be what the world expected. She is not bitter, she is not angry, she is not shutting out the world, she is simply walking through it on her own terms. She smiles not because she has something to prove, but because she has nothing to hide. No secrets, no shame, no unfinished sentences, waiting for someone else to complete them. There is courage in her, not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that whispers in the dark, "You are enough." And she listens every day. She listens. When the loneliness creeps in, as it sometimes will, because she's still human, she doesn't run from it. She holds it gently like an old friend. She asks it what it wants to teach her, and then she moves forward. Not in desperation, but in quiet strength. That's the difference. You see, loneliness is an ache, solitude is a choice. And when you choose it, when you truly embrace it, it transforms from emptiness into expansion. She doesn't fear the silence she has made. peace with it. While others scramble to fill the void with distractions and noise, she sits still and listens to what most people spend their whole lives avoiding. And in that listening, she finds something rare. She finds herself, and what a discovery. That is, she realizes that she doesn't need to be half of anything. She is whole, complete, complex, wounded, and wise. Capable of joy that doesn't depend on performance. Capable of rest that doesn't require permission. Capable of building a life brick by brick, not waiting for someone to hand it to her, but laying the foundation herself. She doesn't apologize for the way shallow. She doesn't shrink to fit into narrow definitions. She expands, she fills the space she's in, and by doing so she creates a new image of what it means to be a woman, not a woman waiting to beckon, but a woman who has already chosen herself. That choice is revolutionary. It challenges the idea that a woman's worth is tied to who stands beside her. It dismantles the myth that being alone means being unloved, and it invites others, men and women alike, to rethink their definitions of successful, filmed, and joy. So when she walks into a room, she doesn't do so with hesitation. She doesn't scan the crowd looking for validation. She enters with calm, quiet assurance. She knows who she is. She knows what she's not, and she's made peace with both. There is no tragedy in her solitude, only truth. The kind of truth that doesn't shout but resonates, the kind of truth that doesn't seek to convince but simply is the kind of truth that holds space for others to find their own. And that is the beginning of a life not dictated by fear, but shaped by choice. Not limited by tradition, but expanded by self-understanding. A life where solitude is no longer seen as lack, but as power. There is a certain kind of mastery that does not come from power or influence or applause. It comes from within, quietly, steadily. It's not born in crowds or shaped by the expectations of others. It is cultivated in the stillness of solitude, through the slow, patient work of understanding one's own heart. And when a woman lives alone, truly alone, not just physically but emotional, self-contained, she discovers something most never will. She discovers emotional sovereignty. What does that mean? It means she is not ruled by another's presence, nor by their absence. She does not crumble when the phone doesn't ring. She does not rise only when praised her. Emotional weather is not dictated by someone else's storm. She feels deeply, but she feels for herself, and through herself. She does not need someone to name her feelings for her auto, give her permission to feel them. Her joy is not borrowed, her peace is not dependent. Her love is not conditional on receiving it back. This kind of emotional self-rule is not easily gained. It is not given by time nor granted by life. It is earned through heartbreak that didn't destroy her but refined her, through disappointments that didn't close her but opened her eyes, through nights when no one came and she learned to be her own comfort, through days when she wanted to be held and instead held herself with grace and dignity. The world may have told her she was too much, too sensitive, too independent, too intense, but she learned not to dilute herself to fit within someone else's fragile container. There's a strange beauty in knowing you can walk through the fire and not be burned by someone else's chaos. When others panic, she breathes. When others lash out, she listens, not out of passivity, but because she has learned that control is not in force, but in understanding. And when you understand your own emotional patterns, when you are fluent in the language of your own soul, you do not fear what others bring to the table. You assess, you observe, you choose. That's what makes her different. She doesn't chase. She doesn't plead, she doesn't perform, she offers. And that offering is genuine, whole, and without strings. If it's received with respect, she welcomes connection. If it's mishandled, she withdraws, not in anger, but in wisdom. She no longer ties her value to someone's ability to recognize it. She knows who she is, she knows what she brings. She doesn't beg anyone to seat, and in that silence, in that refusal to plead for affection, lies the kind of strength most people spend lifetimes trying to find. There was a time perhaps when she needed validation, when she needed to be told she was beautiful, worthy, lovable, but now she looks in the mirror and sees more than a reflection. She sees a story that survived heartbreak, loss, loneliness, and came out clearer. She's not immune to emotion, no, she feels it all, the full spectrum. But she is not controlled by it, she honors it, she learns from it, she lets it move through her like wind through leaves. Natural cleansing, essential. She's walked away from relationships, not because she was cold, but because she was awake. She's let go of hands that once made her feel safe, but slowly began to tighten like chains. She's cried, not because she was weak, but because something sacred within her was being denied. And when that happened, she didn't betray herself to keep someone else. She let herself grieve, she let herself mourn, and then she rose. It's a quiet rising, this emotional severity. It doesn't come with fanfare, it comes with discipline. With the decision again and again to choose peace over drama, clarity over confusion, integrity over attachment. She no longer asks to be understood. She no longer stays in rooms where she has to explain her worth. She simply walks away, not as a weapon, but as an act of preservation, and in doing so, she teaches others what it means to live unchained by emotional dependency. She teaches that you can love someone deeply and still choose to walk alone. She teaches that boundaries are not walls, but bridges to truth, that saying no is not cruelty but clarity, that being alone does not mean being unloved. It means being unwilling to accept love that costs your self-respect. This isn't coldness, it's consciousness. And in that awareness, she becomes a mirror. To some she will reflect discomfort. They will see their own lack of control and call her distant. Others will see freedom and be inspired. But she doesn't live to shape their opinions. She lives to honor her own emotional landscape, to tend to it like a garden, pruning what no longer serves, nurturing what brings life, allowing beauty to grow unforced. She no longer gives energy to convincing. Her time is not spent trying to be palatable. She does not water herself down. She does not shrink her pain into something digestible. She owns it. She holds it without shame, because to her every scare is sacred, every tear was a step toward becoming, and there is no shame in having felt deeply, only strength. She knows that true love, if it comes, will not need to be chased. It will meet her where she is. It will see her sovereignty not as a threat, but as an invitation to meet her as an equal, not a savior, to walk beside her, not a head to share in her peace, not disrupt it. And if it doesn't come, she will not despair, because her cup is already full, her heart already whole. What most fear, being alone, she has turned into her sanctuary, and from that sanctuary she does not fear emotion. She welcomes it without letting it rule her. She is the master of her own tides, the author of her own script, the guardian of her own soul. She is not moved by the temporary. She is not seduced by illusion. She has learned that not everything that shines is gold, and not every promise is worth keeping. What matters is alignment, truth, integrity, emotional responsibility. And when those are missing, she walks away not with bitterness, but with reverence for herself, for the lesson, for the pathead. There is no crown on her head, no spotlight on her story, but her emotional severity is its own form of royalty. It is unseen by many, but deeply felt by those who understand its power. She is not a queen of kingdoms, she is a queen of self. And that, dear listener, is the foundation upon which everything else can truly be built. There's something extraordinary about a woman who dares talk know herself. A woman who lives alone begins a journey that many never even start, the journey inward, not out of accident, not from loss, not as punishment, but as a conscious return to the essence of who she is. She becomes both the seeker and the sanctuary. She learns to listen to the still, honest voice within her that had been buried for years beneath noise, expectations, obligations, and the constant hum of needing to be something for someone else. When she is alone, truly alone, a new world opens, not outside her, but within. She starts asking questions no one can answer but her. What do I love? What do I believe? What do I need, not just to survive, but to feel alive? And as those questions rise, so too does a clarity that once seemed unreachable. She begins to see herself not through the lens of others' opinions, but through her own unfiltered awareness. She strips away layers of performance and pretends. She no longer feels the need to explain her choices or justify her dreams. She just becomes them. Growth in its purest form is quiet. It doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it unfolds. Like a tree in winter, it looks barren from the outside, but beneath the surface roots are deepening. That is her life now. What may seem still to others is in fact a season of expansion, and unlike those who race through life in search of applause or distraction, she is slowing down to listen, to observe, to evolve. Not for anyone else's comfort, but for her own truth. She notices things she once missed, the way her thoughts shift with the seasons, how her energy rises and falls with the moon, how her instincts whisper truths she once ignored in the name of love or loyalty. She stops apologizing for feeling deeply, for needing space, for walking away from what no longer aligns. Growth teaches her that not everything lost is a tragedy. Some things are rare release because they've served their purpose and their absence creates room for something greater. Clarity, self-rust, peace. There are days when the work is hard, days when healing feels like an ache that doesn't end, when memory is written like old ghosts asking to be acknowledged. She does not turn away, she sits with the pain, lets it speak, lets it breathe. She understands now that ignoring pain only buries it deeper, where it fears. True strength is not in avoiding discomfort, but in facing it fully, letting it cleanse rather than destroy. She is no longer afraid of breaking open because she knows every crack lets in more light. She reads. She writes. She walks alone sometimes, through the quiet of the morning, sometimes into the soft dusk of evening. These are not lonely moments. These are moments of recalibration, moments where she realigns with herself, checks in with her values, her direction. She doesn't live on autopilot anymore. She chooses with intention, with purpose. She says yes when it's real and no when it's not. She's no longer willing to trade peace for proximity. She doesn't need to buzz around it to feel seen. She sees herself. What's most powerful about her growth is that it is self-initiated. No one told her to change. No one demanded she evolve. She chose it. That's what makes it authentic. She wasn't seeking applause. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She simply got tired of living a version of herself that felt incomplete, and she had the courage to start again. Not with a new relationship, not with a new environment, with a new connection to herself. There is a fire in her now, not of rage but of revelation. She knows her patterns, she knows her boundaries. She knows what drains her and what feeds her soul, and with that knowledge comes a calm power. She no longer reacts impulsively. She responds with awareness. She's less interested in proving she's right and more committed to protecting her peace. She's not above emotions, she just refuses to be consumed by them. Her growth is reflected not in loud declarations but in her quiet choices. She no longer entertains people who don't respect her. She doesn't chase validation or force connections. She stops over-explaining and begins observing. When someone shows her who they are, she believes them the first time. That's growth, not bitter, but wise. She's not closed off, she's just selective, and that selectivity isn't arrogance, it's alignment. She begins to forgive herself not just for the mistakes but for the years she spent doubting her own intuition, for loving people who couldn't love her back, for staying too long in places that shrank her spirit. She doesn't hold that shame anymore. She sees it for what it was, a necessary part of her, becoming a bridge had to cross to get here. And here, this moment, this version of her is something to behold. She's grounded, she's radiant, not because she seeks attention, but because she's fully present. She doesn't shrink from her past. She doesn't fear her future. She's arrived in herself fully, without condition. There's a humility in her too. She knows she is still growing. She knows healing isn't a destination, but a lifelong process. She makes space for new lessons. She's open to feedback, not from those who want to control her, but from those who challenge her to rise without making her feel small. She has no interest in being perfect. She just wants to be real. Her solitude has become her mirror, her teacher, her compass. In it, she has learned to take responsibility for her energy, for her choices, for her voice. She speaks now not to impress, but to connect. She listens not to respond, but to understand. She's present in her own life in a way that many are too distracted to. When you see her, you might not know all she's endured. You might not see the nights she cried, the doubts she fought, the courage it took to begin again, but you'll feel it in the way she walks, in the way she holds space for herself, in the way she doesn't apologize for taking up that space. There is a weight to her presence. Now, not heaviness, but gravity, a groundedness that can't be faked or borrowed. It's earned, and the beautiful thing is, she's not finished. She continues to grow, not because she's broken, but because she's alive, and that more than anything is the point of it all. Not to arrive at some final flawless state, but to remain curious, open, willing to evolve. She knows that growth is not about becoming someone new, but about unbecoming everything she was never meant to be. And with every layer she sheds, she moves closer to the essence of her true self. The woman she was always bumming, even when she didn't yet know her name. There is a rare and quiet power in a woman who has faced life alone and chosen to keep moving forward. Not because she was forced to, not because she had no other choice, but because nothing within her whispered that she could, something deep, something ancient, something undeniably strong. It told her again and again that strength is not found in the volume of one's voice, but in the resolve of one's soul. She listened And in listening, she learned how to lead herself. Leadership begins not in leading others, but in leading the self. And this woman who wakes each morning without a partner beside her, who handles the mundane and the monumental with her own two hands, has become her own compass. She has learned to guide herself through uncertainty, through loneliness, through fear, not without doubt, no, but despite it, and that is where real courage is born. Not in the absence of fear, but in the decision to keep walking through it. There's a common misconception that leadership belongs only to those with titles, with followers, with recognition, but the truth is the most profound. Leadership often happens in silence, when no one is watching, when there is no applause. When the lights are off and the day has been hard and still, she chooses to get up, dress her wounds, and continue. That is leadership of the rarest kind. It is internal, it is consistent, it is self-generated. She doesn't wait for someone to come save her. She saves herself in small daily acts of resilience, paying her own bill, handling her own business, comforting herself through the waves of life that once threatened to drown her. She doesn't source responsibility for her well-being. She takes ownership of her life, her happiness, her direction, her peace. And because of that, she walks with a kind of authority that doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is. She plans her future not around someone else's dreams, but around her own. She makes decisions without needing to look sideways for approval. She trusts her instincts because she's tested them. She's made mistakes, yes, she stumbled, misjudged, diverged. But each time she has returned stronger, not harder, not colder, but clearer. She knows now that leadership isn't about perfection, it's about alignment. It's about being honest now with yourself to say, this is who I am, this is where I'm going, and this is what I will no longer tolerate. When challenges come, as they always do, she does not collapse, she adjusts, she takes a breath. She leans on her discipline, not her desperation. She's learned that emotion, though powerful, does not have torn the show. She can feel it and still make grounded choices. She can cry and still choose to move forward. She does not equate vulnerability with weakness. She sees it as part of the fabric of real strength, the kind that bends but does not break. She has built systems around herself, habits, routines, boundaries that support her even when motivation fades. That's the thing no one tells you about leading your life alone. It's not about grand declarations, but quiet consistency. It's in showing up for yourself when no one else does, in choosing nourishment over neglect, and staying the course even when the road feels long and unglamorous. That's where transformation takes root. She speaks to herself differently now. She no longer belittles herself for needing rest or for not having it all figured out. She knows that real power is not in pretending to be invincible, but in respecting your own limits and still choosing to grow beyond them. Her self-talk is not filled with shame, but with strategy. She doesn't ask, why me? She asks, shit now. And that shift, small but seismic, has changed everything. Others may look at her and see independence, but what they're really seeing is integrity. She's not just living alone, she's living in alignment with her values, with her purpose, with her truth. That's what radiates, that's what draws people in. It's not bravado, it's not rebellion, it's the quiet confidence of someone who has taken the time to become whole without waiting for someone else to complete them. She's not afraid to make decisions. She's not afraid to take risks. She's failed, yes, and she's failed publicly and privately, but each time she has owned it. She doesn't run from the consequences of her actions. She learns from them, she evolves. That's what leadership looks like when no one's clapping. It's not perfect, but it is real and it is rare. She inspires not by preaching, but by example. Others watch her sometimes in awe, wondering how she carries so much without crumbling. What they don't see are the early mornings she wrestled with doubt, the nights she questioned her own worth, the 1,000 tiny moments when she chose growth over comfort. She doesn't wear her struggle like a badge, but it's stitched into her strength. Quietly, unforgettably, she is not leading an empire. She is leading a life one that honors her, that reflects her deepest values, that gives her room to breathe and space to dream. She doesn't need to dominate a room, she needs only to be herself fully, fearlessly, and in doing so she gives others permission to do the same. The beauty of her path is that it isn't paved by anyone else's approval. She is not shaped by the need to be understood, but by the need to be true. And when she walks into a room, that Ruth enters before she says a word, because when a woman has let herself out of fear, out of chaos, out of dependence, and into clarity, she becomes a force unto herself. There are those who will misunderstand her solitude, mistake it for bitterness or disinterest, but they do not see the full story. They do not see the discipline it took to say no when every fiber wanted to say yes just to feel wanted. They do not see the strength it took to sit with silence and not rush to fill it with noise or distractions. They do not see the leader she's become. Steady, clear, sovereign. She doesn't need to be followed to know she's on the right path. She doesn't need an audience to validate her worth. She isn't performing, she is living authentically, unapologetically, and in doing so she models a new kind of leadership, one that begins at home within the self and radiates outward, note and dominance, but in depth every decision she makes now reflects a higher standard, not out of pride, but out of purpose, not out of superiority, but out of self-respect. She does not chase, she attracts not because of charm but because of clarity. She leads not by force but by example, not by demanding loyalty, but by embodying integrity, and she's far from done. The woman who leads herself is never finished growing. Each day is a new decision, each choice a reflection of the life she is committed to building, not just for show but for soul. And that commitment, unseen and unwavering, is what makes her unstoppable. There is a stillness that settles into the life of a woman who has walked alone, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that feels earned. In that stillness, a mething sacred begins to take forms. A peace that doesn't rely on the presence of others, a peace that is not bought by companionship, or traded for approval, or anchored in another's gaze. It is hers, grown slowly, patiently, through seasons of solitude and self-reowning. It is the peace of a woman who has made her inner world her home. It is not a peace born from perfection, nor from the absence of conflict. It is the result of choice, 1,000 choices, repeated daily, to remove herself from noise, to step back from drama, to observe rather than absorb. She learns to protect her mental space with the same urgency others might protect their physical homes. She curates her thoughts, guards her energy, cleanse out the dust of old wounds that no longer belong. And in doing so, she creates something rare, a sanctuary within herself that cannot be disturbed by external chaos. She has come to understand that peace is not something one finds, it is something one builds, and like anything built, it requires intention. She no longer lets just any own walk into her life and rearrange the furniture of her mind. She is no longer available for conversations that drain her spirit, relationships that confuse her worth, or environments that force her to shrink. Her boundaries are not walls but gates with keys handed only to those who bring respect, clarity, and presence. Her peace is hard-earned, and because of that, it is fiercely protected, not through aggression but through discernment. She does not raise her voice, she raises her standards. She does not explain her decisions with desperation, she simply acts aligned with her values, her needs, and her rhythm. She understands now that not every invitation requires a response. Not every conflict deserves a reaction. Not every opinion needs to be entertained. There is a beautiful clarity that grows in the mind of a woman who has learned to be alone. She's not distracted by the rush of validation, not seduced by the noise of popularity. She listens to her own inner voice, one that once was faint, buried beneath years of conditioning, obligation, and expectation, but now that voice is strong. It has become her guide. When something doesn't feel right, she doesn't push it down. She listens, she asks why, she adjusts. Her life is no longer built on people-pleasing or pretending, it's built on alignment. She wakes with a certain steadiness now, a gentleness toward her. She no longer rushes into the day trying to prove her worth. She already knows it. She walks through her hours with awareness. She notices the sky, the breeze, the way the light dances across her floor. These small moments are not wasted on her. They are her refuge. She doesn't need to be surrounded by constant stimulation to feel alive. She's discovered joy in the quiet, truth in the silence. When people come into her life now, they enter a space that has already been made whole. She's not seeking completion. She's not offering chaos disguised as passion. She's not looking for someone to fix her. She's inviting connection from a place of fullness, from the understanding that love, when it's real, adds to the peace she's already cultivated. It doesn't disturb it. And if it begins to, she steps away, not in anger, but in honor of what she's built. This woman has faced herself, truly faced herself in the mirror, in the dark, in the painful moments that no one else sees. She has wept over her own wounds, spoken life over her own fears, forgiven herself for not knowing better before she died, and in doing So she has removed the need for chaos. She no longer thrives on adrenaline or confusion. She does not confuse intensity for intimacy. She is no longer drawn to what hurts. She is drawn to what heals. Her peace is not passive. It is not bland. It is not dull. It is rich, deep layered with wisdom and experience. It is not the absence of emotion, but the presence of emotional intelligence. She feels everything, but she is not ruled by it. She has creed without breaking. She has endured without bitterness. She has chosen softness in a world that told her to harden. That is strength, not the armor, but the courage to live without it. She doesn't run from solitude. She returns to it. Because in that space she remembers who she is, she recalibrates, she reflects. She rests. There is no desperation to fill the silence, no rush to be seen. She's not performing anymore. She's being freely, authentically. That authenticity is her peace. It is not something that can be bought, borrowed, or imitated. It is cultivated, is practiced, it is embodied. There are people who won't understand this version of her who will see. Her calm as cold, her solitude as sadness, her contentment as complacency. That's all right. She no longer shapes herself around the misunderstanding of others. She's not here to be deciphered. She's here to be at peace, and those who are meant to walk beside her will feel that peace and know what it costs. She carries herself differently now, not with arrogance, but with presence. She's not proving anything. She's not seeking a role in someone else's story. She's writing her own every page, a reflection of the woman she has become through stillness, through struggle, through the sacred work of self-awareness. Her peace is her protest, her quiet is her power. What once made her feel lonely now makes her feel free. She is no longer afraid of quiet nights, of being alone with her thoughts, of walking through the world unaccompanied, because she is not truly alone. She walks with wisdom, she sits with strength. She rests in the arms of her own becoming, and that is more than enough in her presence. People feel something different, not noise, not effort, not urgency, but stillness, safety. A kind-off inner glow that doesn't beg to be noticed but cannot be ignored. Because when a woman has found peace in her solitude, when she no longer fights to be loved, when she has loved herself back to life, that energy becomes unshakable. She is not waiting to be rescued. She is not longing to be completed. She is not yearning for someone to arrive and make her life meaningful. Her life is meaningful because she has made it so, and anyone who comes close must add, not subtract, must bring harmony, not havoc, must recognize that loving her means honoring the sanctuary she has built. There is no apology in her peace, no hesitation, no compromise. It is the result of work most people will never see, but she sees it, she feels it, and she knows that whatever else life may bring, she will never again abandon that sacred place within herself where peace resides, because she has walked through fire to find it, and once found, she will never let it go. There comes a moment in a woman's life, especially one who walks the path alone, when she looks into the mirror and realizes she is no longer becoming. She already is, not because she has arrived at some perfect version of herself, but because she has stopped apologizing for who she has grown into. She has spent years shaping herself from the inside out, chiseling away self-doubt, sanding down the rough edges of guilt, carving space for truth. And now she carries herself like a woman who knows what she deserves, knows what she offers, knows what she will no longer accept. The validation she used to chase no longer seduces her. The approval she once bent backward to earn now feels like a whisper in a distant room. Her power isn't loud, it's settled. She knows who she is, and more importantly, she knows who she is not. There is no frantic grasping for identity, no need to be everything to everyone. Her worth is no longer tied to her ability to please, to fix, to impress. She's done with performing, she's done with shrinking. She used to wonder if standing on her own would ever feel natural, if the silence would ever stop feeling like punishment, if solitude would ever stop feeling like lack. But now she sees if for what it is, space, precious space that allowed her to heal, space that demanded she face herself, space that shaped her into the kind of woman who doesn't just survive without a partner, she thrives. She doesn't carry bitterness for what wasn't given to her. She carries gratitude for what she gave to herself when no one else could. There is strength in her presence now, the kind that doesn't need to compete. She walks into a room without needing to dominate it, and yet people notice. Not because she demands attention, but because she has nothing to prove. Her energy speaks before she does. It says, I've built myself, I've walked through storms. I've learned the difference between solitude and loneliness, between silence between being alone and being empowered. She has stopped negotiating her worth at tables built on insecurity. She no longer asks people to see her. If they don't, she keeps walking. She's not looking for acceptance. She's looking for resonance. She's not interested in convincing anyone of her value. She knows now that some won't understand her depth because if they've never dared to dive into their own. That's not her burden to carry in her past. She may have tolerated crumbs and called it care. She may have explained herself too many times to those who had no intention of listening. She may have bent herself into shapes unrecognizable just to feel wanted. But those days are gone. She doesn't confuse the attention with love anymore. She doesn't confuse comfort with connection. She doesn't mistake being chosen with being cherished. What she offers now is not for the faint of heart. It is for the present, the conscious, the brave. There's fire in her stillness, not rage, but clarity, not vengeance, but vision. She's not on a mission to prove the world wrong. She's on a mission to live so right, so full, so fearlessly, that she becomes her own evidence, her life. Her peace, her joy, they speak for her now, and those who have wisdom to see her will, those who don't will simply drift away, unable to match the frequency of a woman who has decided she will not dim her light for anyone she embraces, aging not with dread but with reverence. Each line on her face is a story, each scar a lesson, each gray strand a badge of survival. She no longer mourns the passing of time because she understands that time is what gave her everything. It gave her perspective, it gave her resilience, it gave her herself, and in a world that told her she needed someone else to be whole, she learned Tobe her own, beginning, middle, and continuation. She is not hardened. Though she's known pain, she is not closed off how she's been let down. Her heart is open, but it is no longer available for negotiation. She loves differently. Now, not recklessly, not desperately, but purely. She doesn't give love to be saved. She gives love to share what she has already built within. And if that love is not returned with equal intention, she does not beg. She blesses the experience and keeps moving because her time is sacred now, her peace is sacred now, her standards are sacred now. She understands the power of saying no, not out of defiance, but out of discernment. She turns down offers that once would have made her knees weak because now she listens to her intuition instead of her insecurities. She says no to anything that doesn't honor the woman she's become. She says no to people who confuse us with entitlement. She says no to the familiar patterns that once kept her small. Her no is not anger, it is alignment. The woman who lives alone truly lives not in fragments, not in shadows, but in fullness. She has become a safe place for herself. She laughs louder now because there is no one to shush her joy. She moves freely because there is no need of pretending. She creates, she explores, she breathes deeply because her life is no longer on pause waiting for someone else to press play. She is the rhythm, she is the music, she is the dance. There are days, of course, when the ache returns, when the silence feels heavier than usual, when the world around her buzzes with companionship and she finds herself longing for a warm hand to hold. But those moments no longer define her. She honors them, but she does not let them govern her because even in longing she's whole, even in yearning she is enough. The woman who has chosen to live without dependency has chosen to live in sovereignty. She has released the illusion that love must come wrapped in romance to be valid. She loves in 1,000 ways now, in her work, in her friendships, in her solitude, in her mornings, in her rituals. She is love, and that truth has liberated her. She doesn't need to explain her choices anymore. She doesn't entertain pity disguised as concern. She doesn't justify her joy. She simply lives, and her life as it is, unconventional, unpartnered, unbound, is a testimony of courage, of clarity, of a woman who refused to wait or be chosen, a woman who chose herself and never looked back. Ladies and gentlemen, the woman who lives alone is not a question mark. She is an exclamation point. She teaches us something profound. That freedom is not loud, strength is not aggressive, and love, true love, starts within. So if you know such a woman, honor her. If you are such a woman, celebrate yourself, because in a world that constantly tells you what you should be, you chose who you are, and that is a rare kind of power. Thank you, and never forget, living alone does not mean walking alone. It means walking your path with fire in your spirit and peace in your soul. Thank you.